So this will be a response to Everett's vlog. He's just finished a book by the cognitive scientist, I guess you would say, Thomas Metzinger. The book is called Being No One, and Everett's vlog laid out his argument in that book, which was basically that the self is an illusion, or that it is imaginary. It's a construction of the brain. Um, Now, I don't necessarily disagree with Metzinger's argument here, though I wouldn't want to flatten this term self. The self, or self as a word, it can have many meanings. I would like to replace it with ego in the context in which um, Everett's vlog was using it. I would agree that the ego is imaginary, especially in the sense that, for example, Jacques Lacan, the French psychoanalyst, talks about the ego as being literally a construction of the child as they see themselves for the first time in a mirror, and as they begin to interact and mirror the faces of others, mimic. We internalize, how other faces see us and how we see our own face, and that becomes our ego. And so it is literally imaginary. In the sense of being a series of images. So I definitely agree that it's a construct, basically. It's a false identity. But here's the problem, because I think Metzinger's attempt here to explain away the self is basically material. What all that he ends up doing is saying that the brain is the self, and that in fact the self is made up of many smaller selves. It's a neural net, and so your selfhood is distributed across many modules of gray matter that perform different functions. Right? Everett, at the beginning of his vlog, said that your brain usually perceives and then represents the world, and he went on to say that the self, though, is not perceived and then represented. It's just constructed by the brain. But see, the thing is, if the self is constructed by the brain, then so are all our representations. We talk about perceptions, but if all that we really have is the construction that our brain makes of the world, then we've only ever got an illusion. We've only ever got an imaginary idea or representation of what the world itself is. So basically, we've talked ourselves into a solipsistic position, and I think when you take materialism into an attempt to understand consciousness, you can't avoid solipsism, because whatever is aware is in a materialistic paradigm reduced to what's inside the skull. If that's true, then you don't see with your eyes, you see your brain. You don't see the world with your eyes, you see what's going on, reversed on your occipital. I would want to avoid this sort of solipsistic, materialistic, representational picture by first of all embodying the mind, which is to say that the self is not a thing or a distributed set of interacting processes or modules in the brain, but it's in fact something which comes forth through your being present, and in fact being temporally spread in the world. Temporally spread in the sense that you are always already in the world. You don't have to represent it to yourself internally. The very division between internal and external is a semantic one. We make it up after the fact when we talk about our experience, but experience itself knows no difference between inside and outside, because we are always already thrown into the world inheriting a past we didn't necessarily pick. The very structure of our organism is inherited. We just wake up within this body, and it's a body that's of the world. And so whatever wakefulness is, it's come out of the whole process of worlding. It's not something that's somehow lodged. If you want to say that consciousness isn't a substance and that the self isn't this, immaterial soul that lives somewhere in the pineal gland, then you've got to also get rid of this idea that the awareness is just in the brain, because then you're just turning awareness into something that can be simply located in space and time. And I don't think it can be. Consciousness is better described in terms of intentionality, because when we talk about intentionality, it's not as hard to avoid turning consciousness into a subject, into a substance that can be localized in here. Instead, intentionality shows you that consciousness it's a process of being in the world. So your organism and the environment are coupled always. To separate them, you'd have to go into very abstract sorts of reflection. In experience, as a person, directly encountering a world that you already care about, you don't have a choice to care about existence, and you say it's your own existence, but part of existing is being outside of yourself and being related to others in relationships that reach to your very core, and not only you're related to others in that sort of a deep penetrating way, you're related to the world, to the atmosphere, to the weather, to the sun that provides the food that you eat to keep your body living. You're intimately related to the world around you. And so what I would argue is that recognizing this intentional way in which you are grounded in the world, in the sense that you as a figure have a horizon that you can never exhaust. You walk towards the horizon and it continues to expand. That's part of what being conscious means, as far as I'm concerned, that there is an infinite horizon. And so to reduce consciousness to what happens in the brain, I think, is missing the point. It's excessive abstraction, and I'm coming back to that phrase a lot in some of my recent videos. If you pay attention to your phenomenological experience, I would think that you would come to the same conclusion that Metzinger has, based on more empirical study of neurology and of experiments in laboratories. Paying attention to your own first personal experience, you would come to the same conclusion that the ego, that distinct agent you think you are, who has thoughts and who has feelings, rather than just being the feelings and the thoughts themselves, that is an illusion. You never arrive at any ego in your own experience. You just constantly reach for one, perhaps, but it's never present. It's always an idea, an image. It's imaginary. So there I agree with Metzinger. It's just in what he then later wants to conclude from this, that consciousness is something in the brain. And maybe he doesn't actually conclude that. Maybe that's Everett's vlog adding his own interpretation, because I haven't read Metzinger's book. It's really long, and as Everett says in his description, you should say about 6 months if you want to get through it and actually understand it. So Everett can correct me if I'm misinterpreting Metzinger, but I think based on what Everett was saying, I think my arguments still hold, or are relevant at least. So yeah, I think that pretty much sums up my perspective on this. So yeah, get back to me if you feel like it, or if you don't, that's okay too, because there's no one there to blame, right?